Imagine waking up one day and discovering that you have acquired the magic ability to read minds. What would you do with it? Our protagonist, Adachi, used this ability to find a husband. In his company, Adachi is just an ordinary office worker. He has been single since birth. But on his 30th birthday, while buying something at a convenience store, he accidentally touched the cashier's hand and discovered he could hear her thoughts. This ability seemed rather useless. Not only was it unhelpful, but it also made the already tough rush hour subway experience even more painful. He considered using this ability to understand girls' feelings by touching them, but if he had the courage to do so, he wouldn't still be single. When he arrived at the office, Adachi encountered the famously handsome and rich Kurosawa, who had joined the company at the same time as him. Kurosawa excelled in many areas and was gentle enough to befriend anyone. He was very popular in the company. Feeling a bit jealous, Adachi covertly touched Kurosawa and was surprised to discover that Kurosawa had a secret crush at the office. While in the elevator, Adachi looked around, curious about who the handsome and rich Kurosawa liked. Then he was pushed into a corner by the crowd and accidentally pinned against the wall by Kurosawa. Being very close, Adachi heard Kurosawa's thoughts clearly.
すげえ近い、すげえ可愛い、すげえ好き。今日めっちゃついてる。やばい、めっちゃドキドキする。めぐせほんと可愛い。てか朝からこんな近くで見ていいの？もしかして今日死ぬ？無理、めちゃくちゃ可愛い。
Because of the morning's incident, Adachi doubted he actually had superpowers and thought he might just be hallucinating. After all, Kurosawa was very popular at the company, and he was just a lowly employee who couldn't even talk back when scolded by his boss. How could someone as outstanding as Kurosawa possibly like him? Because of his boss, Adachi was forced to work overtime. Kurosawa came over quietly to help him with his documents. Adachi reminded himself that he didn't have superpowers and was just hearing things when he heard Kurosawa say he wanted to lick the mole on his neck. Shocked, he rushed to the bathroom and discovered he indeed had a mole there. It seemed this was not a hallucination after all. When leaving work, the office was empty, and Adachi felt vulnerable to any potential attack. However, his opinion soon changed because Kurosawa noticed Adachi had caught a cold and immediately wrapped his own scarf around him. He was quite angry with the department head for how they treated Adachi despite his hard work. Kurosawa couldn't bear to leave Adachi alone. Adachi realized Kurosawa was truly a good person, chastised himself for his needless worries, and thanked him for his help. Although he was initially startled when Kurosawa suggested repaying him physically, Adachi quickly realized he was just talking about treating him to something, though he wasn't completely sure if Kurosawa was serious or not. After missing the last train, Adachi found taxi fares too expensive. Kurosawa then invited him to stay at his place, which was close to the office and had reasonable taxi costs. Adachi felt conflicted, knowing Kurosawa liked him. Despite Kurosawa being kind and never having harmed him, Adachi considered testing his feelings by touching him. However, he slipped and fell. Kurosawa quickly helped him up, worried he might be hurt. Adachi was moved, realizing Kurosawa really was a good person, and decided to stay the night given the high taxi fare. Upon agreeing, he noticed Kurosawa imagining him in pajamas. At Kurosawa's home, Adachi found they shared many interests. Kurosawa had even prepared perfectly fitting pajamas for him, leaving Adachi with mixed feelings. After showering, he declined any alcohol, not daring to drink too much there. Having been single for 30 years, and unsure how to interact despite his ability to read minds, Adachi pretended to sleep. When Kurosawa approached him later, Adachi's heart raced, curious about his intentions. However, Kurosawa simply took his phone and left, making Adachi wonder if he was expecting more. The next morning, Kurosawa had prepared breakfast, believing the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. At work, Adachi planned to keep his distance, overwhelmed by Kurosawa's affection. After learning Kurosawa had helped with documents, the department head insisted Adachi thank him and gave them a voucher for a barbecue. This forced Adachi into social interaction, to Kurosawa's delight. The barbecue tasted great, and Adachi enjoyed the meal despite Kurosawa's attempts to flirt. He found their interaction easy and thought being friends wasn't bad. When paying, the voucher provided by their boss was invalid, and Adachi, short on cash, panicked. Kurosawa quickly offered his card to cover the bill, despite Adachi's insistence on splitting it. Kurosawa mentioned there would be other opportunities. Adachi knew Kurosawa liked him and appreciated his help at work and gentle nature. They continued their friendship, and upon touching a candy in Kurosawa's hand, Adachi heard Kurosawa's heartfelt thoughts of happiness and anticipation for future meals together. Adachi instinctively stepped back. Adachi felt his previous thoughts were too harsh, so he apologized and withdrew cash from a convenience store. He returned all the money for the meal to Kurosawa, stating he could no longer accept his kindness. Kurosawa was visibly upset, and Adachi left hurriedly after giving him the money, unsure how to deal with the situation. Confused about his feelings towards Kurosawa, Adachi sought advice from his college friend Tsuge, who was a romance novelist. Adachi joked about being single for 30 years and acquiring superpowers, which Tsuge teased him about, suggesting that virgins tend to fantasize. Tsuge advised keeping Kurosawa on the hook, as he was handsome, wealthy, and caring. However, Adachi didn't want to exploit Kurosawa's sincerity. Tsuge reassured him, suggesting that perhaps Kurosawa liked Adachi for this very reason. Tsuge advised Adachi not to rush and to clarify his feelings. If unsure how to respond, he should do something Kurosawa might dislike. Adachi appreciated Tsuge's reliable advice as a romance novelist. He then shared some takoyaki he bought, only to discover Tsuge was also a virgin. It turned out they were both in the same boat. Tsuge's words made sense to Adachi, who decided to explore his feelings towards Kurosawa. On reflection, he realized he had no reason to dislike Kurosawa, who was excellent in many ways and kind-hearted. Imagining a kissing scene between them made Adachi uncomfortable. Yet at the office, he couldn't even look Kurosawa in the eye, despite having rebuffed him before. Kurosawa remained gentle, which made Adachi feel guilty. He realized he was falling for Kurosawa when he started feeling sympathy for him. At that moment, Adachi noticed a client of Kurosawa request the removal of tea and snacks, a situation that seemed to trouble Kurosawa as it was unusual and the deal was at risk. Adachi took the initiative to serve coffee, which allowed him to get close and hear the client's thoughts. He immediately arranged for the desired items. It turned out the client, a middle-aged man, was a dessert enthusiast. Adachi's timely delivery of cupcakes kept the negotiation on track. He explained that the client, although stern-looking, loved desserts and was always eager to have the cream cakes previously offered at the company. Everyone praised Adachi's quick thinking. After the business was concluded, Kurosawa specifically thanked Adachi, who was then suddenly invited to a dinner celebrating the success of the deal. Adachi was momentarily stunned, then was taken to a dinner after work. Kurosawa stated that securing the deal was largely due to Adachi's significant contribution. Adachi initially thought his ability was rather useless, but now he sees it has its benefits. Unexpectedly, a game of kings started at the dinner table, and Adachi and Kurosawa were picked to kiss. The crowd cheered instantly. Adachi was stunned, as it was his first kiss, but Kurosawa seemed calm. He wanted to quickly complete the dare, but noticed Adachi was very nervous. Instead, they settled for a forehead kiss. Kurosawa truly cared, not wanting Adachi to feel upset. Adachi sensed the complex emotions, and after a moment, followed Kurosawa with a bottle of water to talk on the balcony. There, Adachi read Kurosawa's mind again. Kurosawa mentioned the joke was a bit much this time, and although he wanted to go with the flow, he worried about Adachi's reaction. Internally, he felt guilty, but still liked him. Adachi paused and subconsciously responded that he didn't dislike him. He was becoming aware of his own feelings, admitting he didn't mind Kurosawa's closeness, and shared that he had never kissed or been in a relationship before. The nervousness was purely from shock. Adachi knew saying this meant no turning back. Learning that Adachi didn't mind his closeness, Kurosawa almost dropped his water in joy. Adachi was aware of what his words implied, especially after talking with Tsuge and realizing he had feelings for Kurosawa. Hearing Kurosawa's thoughts didn't make him want to escape, but to understand him better. Suddenly, Kurosawa pinned Adachi against the railing, not a good idea by a high ledge. Colleagues arrived, and Adachi pushed Kurosawa away just in time to avoid an accident. They discussed heading to the next venue. Kurosawa asked if Adachi could catch the last train. Adachi checked the time and said it was possible, but Kurosawa grabbed his wrist, thinking he wouldn't let him go tonight. Adachi panicked, feeling things were moving too fast, and decided to head home. Tsuge, sensing something odd from a message, planned to ask more about it next time. At work the next day, Adachi found himself unconsciously watching Kurosawa, who seemed as calm as ever. When Kurosawa approached for some data, Adachi read his thoughts again. relieved to know Kurosawa didn't want to make him uncomfortable. He heard Kurosawa internally rejoicing at Adachi's lack of relationship experience, planning to slowly ensnare him. Adachi felt a bit overwhelmed. During a company trip to a KTV, Adachi saw Kurosawa surrounded by girls vying for his attention. Adachi thought he had it tough. Just then, a junior co-worker, Yuta, came over to chat. Adachi, reading his mind, knew Yuta felt sick, but was trying to keep the mood up. He gave Yuta his own stomach medicine and handed him a water bottle, helping him with a handkerchief. Seeing this, Kurosawa quickly whisked Yuta away. While resting on chairs, the department head asked if Kurosawa sings. Adachi was also curious, wondering if Kurosawa was tone deaf. So he complimented Yuta on his singing. Kurosawa immediately claimed he could sing too, and chose a difficult song, performing it perfectly. Adachi was impressed, wondering how such a talented person could like him. Lost in thought, Adachi accidentally bumped into Fujisaki, who was ordering drinks for everyone. She was very gentle, and Adachi had once thought if such a gentle girl liked him, he wouldn't know how to respond. But he knew it was just a fantasy. Later, Adachi went to the restroom and came out to find Fujisaki being harassed by men from another company. When Fujisaki saw Adachi, she looked at him for help. The drunk men were persistent. Adachi was scared, but knew he couldn't back down. However, the situation escalated quickly. Just then, Kurosawa arrived. His strong presence made the men retreat. Fujisaki thanked them and hurried away. Kurosawa noticed a scratch on Adachi's neck and offered a band-aid. When Adachi touched him, he heard Kurosawa's thoughts again and realized Kurosawa was jealous of Yuta and Fujisaki getting close to Adachi. Adachi was surprised as he thought Kurosawa was always calm and perfect. He found this side of Kurosawa somewhat endearing. Oh no, was he falling for him? One day, Yuta invited Adachi and Kurosawa to a sauna. Kurosawa, who had been preparing for this, wanted Adachi to see his abs. But when he turned around, Adachi had already left. In the sauna, Kurosawa was nervous and couldn't look directly at Adachi's body. Although he had feelings for Adachi, his past relationships had been with women, and he wasn't sure how to face Adachi. Just as Adachi got up to leave, Kurosawa glanced at him, and thoughts about Adachi's soft belly flooded his mind. The thoughts reached Adachi through the steam, startling him, and he quickly wrapped a towel around himself and ran off, vowing to get in shape. As they parted, Kurosawa took a photo of Adachi, pondering their dynamic. Adachi didn't seem opposed to his advances, but it was likely just friendly affection. Despite knowing this, Kurosawa felt saddened. Seeing Adachi help a fallen boy reminded Kurosawa of the day he fell for Adachi. Kurosawa has been favored since childhood for his handsome appearance. However, entering society brought criticism, with people claiming he only advanced due to his looks and calling him derogatory names. Despite this, he worked hard and gained much recognition. At a company meeting with a major female client who was very fond of Kurosawa, Adachi was also present. Kurosawa viewed Adachi as an ordinary and inflexible employee. Still, he intervened to shield Adachi from drinking too much. The client even suggested that Kurosawa stay with her overnight, which made him feel extremely uncomfortable. When he stepped out of the restroom, he overheard other employees gossiping about him, leaving him with mixed feelings. After the dinner, everyone left except Adachi, who stayed behind to find Kurosawa visibly upset. Adachi let him rest on his lap, praised his good qualities, and acknowledged his ability to stand up for others. Adachi admitted seeing Kurosawa's strong side, but found his vulnerability refreshing. Kurosawa was moved and began to secretly observe Adachi over the following months, eventually realizing his feelings resembled a first love. Kurosawa complimented Adachi's gentleness, while Adachi remarked that he had been rather gloomy and had struggled to help others until he met Kurosawa, which boosted his confidence. Kurosawa found Adachi's words incredibly touching and insisted on taking a selfie together. Tsuge was woken up by his cat and began his day's updates after feeding it. That day, a delivery man arrived with a parcel, which Tsuge struggled to receive, appearing awkward to the young, lively delivery man. Tsuge had just turned 30. Recalling Adachi's joke that remaining a virgin until 30 turns one into a wizard. As he took the parcel, Tsuge discovered he could hear the delivery man's thoughts, who complained about Tsuge's slow handling, but didn't voice it. The delivery man was impressed by the well-cared-for cat and expressed that Tsuge, despite seeming unreliable, was actually quite gentle. Tsuge was deeply affected by these words and couldn't forget the delivery man's face. When the delivery man, Minato, returned, Tsuge knew he wanted to see the cat and invited him in. Minato thought Tsuge might seem odd, but was a good pet owner, better than a mere onlooker. Tsuge then invited Minato to visit the cat whenever he was free after work. Minato was embarrassed but agreed, leaving Tsuge feeling shy about his newfound magical abilities. Later, Adachi received a message from Tsuge, inviting him out for drinks to discuss business. During their conversation, they touched upon an incident where Fujisaki was picked on, and both Adachi and Fujisaki were scolded. It ended with Kurosawa coming to their rescue. Tsuge mentioned that Adachi seemed very happy lately in Kurosawa's company. Adachi paused, realizing it was true. Tsuge was about to ask about the mind-reading magic when the waiter suddenly brought stir-fried tofu, making the atmosphere a bit awkward. Tsuge couldn't bring up the magic, and they left the bar after finishing their meal. Tsuge gathered courage to ask again, but then heard people arguing across the street. A beautiful woman was pulling Kurosawa, asking to stay over for a night. Seeing that the man was Kurosawa, Adachi was stunned and felt very downhearted as he went home. Tsuge exclaimed, "Brother, I still haven't asked about the magic." Adachi mistakenly thought that the beautiful woman was Kurosawa's ex-girlfriend and walked home dejectedly. Isn't it a thing in Japanese dramas that it always rains when you're sad? Adachi later realized that something was off with his feelings. The next day at work, Kurosawa was puzzled to hear that Adachi had taken a day off. Adachi, who had braved the rainy night without an umbrella, ended up with a cold. Hungry and finding nothing in the fridge, he went back to sleep. Thinking of last night's beautiful woman, Adachi felt sour, thinking Kurosawa must have had ex-girlfriends given his merits. He still couldn't understand his own feelings. As he drifted off, Adachi dreamt about a gathering 5 years ago, where the girls couldn't believe someone nearly 30 had never been in a relationship. What's wrong with being single? Adachi's crush was also there. He stepped out to take a call and came back to hear them discussing how dull he was, ending his secret affection. Previous crushes haunted him until the doorbell rang, waking him up. To his surprise, it was Kurosawa at the door. Learning Adachi hadn't eaten, Kurosawa immediately entered and cooked him a meal. Watching him eat, Adachi was touched as he hadn't eaten all day, and the meal tasted incredibly good. Since there was no thermometer or medicine at home, Adachi hadn't gone to the hospital. Kurosawa felt so sympathetic that he checked Adachi's temperature with his forehead, making Adachi blush and jump. Afterwards, Kurosawa helped clean up and went to a convenience store. Adachi couldn't understand why Kurosawa, who had such a beautiful ex-girlfriend, would be so kind to someone ordinary like him. Busy Kurosawa didn't know he was almost missing out on his future wife. After tidying up, he instructed Adachi to definitely visit the hospital the next day before preparing to leave. Adachi expressed his gratitude to Kurosawa, saying no one outside his family had ever taken care of him like this, revealing he had never been in a relationship and thought of himself as inferior. Kurosawa was secretly thrilled, thinking this must be Adachi's first love. If I could be Adachi's first love, I'd be overjoyed. Adachi blushed instantly upon hearing his own heart's words. Kurosawa thought he was feverish. Little did he know, Adachi was just confirming his own feelings and was about to confess to Kurosawa. Unexpectedly, the beautiful woman they had seen earlier approached them. Adachi was terrified, fearing a dramatic showdown. Kurosawa was also surprised. Wasn't she supposed to stay just one day? Moreover, he called the beautiful woman sister. Turns out, they were siblings. The sister had come because she installed a GPS on Kurosawa's phone. Adachi noticed they indeed looked alike. Realizing she was not an ex-girlfriend, Adachi breathed a sigh of relief. The sister, noticing Adachi and Kurosawa seemed close, snatched Kurosawa's keys, planning to stay at his place for a few days and suggesting Kurosawa stay with Adachi temporarily. This was perfect, as Adachi was sick, and Kurosawa could take care of him, assisting greatly. Kurosawa, imagining living together with Adachi, immediately agreed to the idea. Adachi, clueless, was suddenly assigned a roommate. Kurosawa knew not to rush things, so he feigned going to a hotel. However, Adachi sneezed, and Kurosawa, worried, quickly pushed him to bed, accidentally achieving a dramatic moment. As he pinned Adachi against the wall, Adachi listened to his chaotic thoughts about flushed cheeks and moist lips, where desire and reason fiercely battled until reason prevailed. The next day, Adachi woke up to find Kurosawa had stayed by his side all night. Remembering the imagined cohabitation, Adachi decided to tease him but ended up being outmaneuvered. Since they were living together, they had to squeeze onto the train for work together in the morning. Kurosawa hadn't realized how tough Adachi's morning commute was. At work, after helping Fujisaki tidy the office, Adachi stepped out to find Kurosawa waiting and quickly hid. His feverish brain was unclear yesterday, but today, calm. He realized Kurosawa liked him. He couldn't sort out his own feelings and needed a week to think. While pondering, he was startled by Yuta passing by, who commented on seeing them commute together, noting their close relationship. Kurosawa arrived, proudly telling Yuta he was temporarily staying at Adachi's place. Yuta, envious, expressed a desire to visit. Adachi saw this as a chance to avoid being alone, and to Kurosawa's astonishment, agreed to let Yuta come over. In the end, the three guys ended up making takoyaki together. Adachi casually mentioned that Yuta did a good job, which prompted Kurosawa to immediately take over the task of making takoyaki. After receiving praise from Adachi, Kurosawa opened a beer for him. As their hands touched, Adachi heard Kurosawa's proud thoughts. Yuta is far from winning Adachi's stomach. Adachi commented on Kurosawa's strong competitive instincts, though he also mentioned that eating takoyaki constantly was getting boring. Suddenly, Yuta pulled out a bottle of super spicy sauce and secretly added it to one of the takoyaki balls to see who would be the unlucky one to get it. Through mind reading, Adachi discovered that Kurosawa couldn't handle spicy food and didn't want to look weak in front of him, feeling a bit sorry for Kurosawa. He was about to read Yuta's mind to find the spicy takoyaki ball to save Kurosawa from embarrassment. Unexpectedly, Kurosawa decided he wanted to see Adachi react to the spicy food. Adachi then retracted his mind-reading intent and let Kurosawa face the consequences. After Kurosawa was overwhelmed by the spice, Yuta took over the cleanup. Adachi noticed Yuta's efficiency and learned that Yuta had joined a dance club in university and had lived a very fulfilling life, although he no longer danced. The best dancer in the club was still active. Yuta described himself as a realist, but through mind reading, Adachi found out that Yuta still missed dancing. Adachi encouraged Yuta that it was okay to dance occasionally since he had practiced it. Later, Adachi went to wash the dishes and Kurosawa, who had woken up, helped him. Hearing Adachi praising Yuta's university achievements, Kurosawa felt unhappy. He turned off the water and blocked Adachi's way, feeling sour because Adachi had never praised him like that. Kurosawa asked Adachi what he had said before his sister showed up yesterday. Adachi intended to respond to Kurosawa's feelings, but felt embarrassed at the moment. Luckily, Yuta broke the awkwardness, but Adachi knew he couldn't delay any longer. Otherwise, Kurosawa would become more anxious. He hadn't expected Kurosawa to be so strong. Yuta missed the last bus, resulting in all three of them staying together. There were only 2 blankets, and it was clear that Adachi couldn't share a bed with Kurosawa after being cornered by him. If he slept with Yuta, Kurosawa would be upset. At this point, Kurosawa also thought that he might not be able to restrain himself if he slept with Adachi, but he strongly opposed the idea of Adachi sleeping with Yuta. Yuta suggested that since he and Adachi were both slim, they could share a bed. But Kurosawa firmly refused, claiming a closer relationship with Adachi. Just as it seemed he would have to share a bed with Kurosawa, Adachi quickly mentioned that his cold had just cleared up. To avoid spreading germs, he decided to sleep alone, thus avoiding the dilemma. Adachi had a restless night of thoughts. The next day at work, Fujisaki came to borrow Adachi's computer for research. Adachi admired Fujisaki's consistent beauty and sighed, thinking that if a soft and lovely girl liked him, he wouldn't be so flustered. Unexpectedly, as Fujisaki approached, Adachi heard her thoughts expressing her liking for him. Kurosawa witnessed this scene. Neither of them knew that right after Fujisaki left the office, she covered her mouth and started fantasizing about them as a couple. Yes, Fujisaki is a fujoshi and she really ships Kurosawa and Adachi together. Just thinking about them possibly living together gave her a boost of motivation at work. Meanwhile, Adachi misunderstood the situation, but told himself that such coincidences don't exist. He took the chance to subtly probe, only to overhear Fujisaki thinking that Adachi gets more attractive the more you look at him. She was totally into the idea of them being a perfect match designed by fate. However, Adachi missed hearing the part where Fujisaki considered her ideal type in terms of the role she preferred in her fantasies. Even wanting to see Adachi played by Kurosawa, Adachi faced misunderstandings 3 times, feeling his heart race again. He began to wonder if it was because he wasn't usually liked by others that he couldn't help but respond to Kurosawa's kindness. Maybe he didn't truly like Kurosawa. The more he thought, the more confused he became. On his way home, he was so distracted that he nearly got hit by a car, but luckily Kurosawa pulled him back in time. Perhaps spurred by Fujisaki's thoughts, Kurosawa couldn't hold back and confessed his feelings right then, not giving Adachi any time to think. Kurosawa explained why he was moved, saying it was the first time he'd felt such an emotion. Concerned about Adachi's confusion, Kurosawa said he would leave for the day. Adachi, recalling times he wanted to respond to confessions but held back because Kurosawa was a man, remained fearful and unsure about his feelings. Before Adachi could decide how to respond, Kurosawa went on a business trip, which relieved Adachi, but he didn't want to hurt Kurosawa. As Adachi turned around, he accidentally bumped into Fujisaki, who had received a last-minute task and was overwhelmed. Adachi helped her edit some documents. Fujisaki indirectly asked about his close relationship with Kurosawa and reminded Adachi to tell Kurosawa to remember the expense receipts for the trip. To Adachi, Fujisaki seemed like a sweet, serious girl who studied a lot, but he was unaware that the books she read were actually BL manga. Because Adachi only caught the first part of conversations due to his touch-triggered mind reading, he mistakenly thought Fujisaki liked him. He hoped that perhaps a relationship with Fujisaki could help him escape his mind-reading curse. However, his mind was still full of thoughts about Kurosawa. Meanwhile, Kurosawa also kept thinking about Adachi. He had always thought he couldn't express his feelings openly and believed Adachi liked gentle girls like Fujisaki. But since Adachi had stayed over at his place, he couldn't hide his feelings anymore. So when he saw Adachi and Fujisaki getting close, he thought Adachi preferred someone like her, and decided to confess quickly, ready to give up if rejected, but also worried about making Adachi uncomfortable. Adachi initially wanted to reject Kurosawa like before, but deep down, he realized he didn't dislike Kurosawa. So, he immediately got up to find him. Is it really okay to leave your post during work? Do you Japanese really love to go for a dramatic run before confessing? After rushing out, Adachi actually found Kurosawa, who had just returned from his trip. First, he apologized for avoiding him until now, and then he gathered his courage to respond to Kurosawa's confession, admitting his feelings as well. Kurosawa was so overjoyed that he dropped his bag and hugged Adachi tightly, his heart pounding. They embraced openly until a passerby made a remark. That brought Adachi back to reality, and he heard Kurosawa's inner thoughts. Kurosawa didn't want to let go, but he remembered he was on a business trip with his boss, who was about to turn the corner. Adachi quickly pushed Kurosawa away. They agreed to interact normally at the office, as not everyone is accepting of office romances, especially since they are both men. However, Fujisaki, from a distance, noticed something was off between them. After some snooping, she was even more convinced that something good had happened between them, secretly thrilled. Meanwhile, Yuta, who noticed Adachi and Kurosawa's close relationship, lamented his own slow reactions. You, Yuta? Never mind. They're drifting on the highway and you're still on the baby bus. A few days later, Tsuge received a text from Adachi saying his latest romance novel's female protagonist became quite interesting, changing from her usual calm demeanor to a fiery tsundere. Tsuge didn't say, but this character was almost exactly like the courier Minato. Tsuge, a romance novelist and singleton for 30 years with mind-reading abilities, was sure he had feelings for Minato. He even considered looking up books on romance, feeling his affection for Minato was too strong. Yet he knew little about Minata, and even thought hearing Minato's voice on the street was a hallucination. But Minato was actually out shopping, and coincidentally met Tsuge. Using his mind reading, Tsuge found out Minato was a bit thirsty, so he immediately asked him to sit down for a drink. Minato went out to buy shoes because he dances regularly and aspires to become a professional dancer. He has even been a backup dancer for a singer. Yuta, Minato's college classmate, has watched everyone else start working while he continues to work part-time to pursue his dream. Sometimes, he feels like giving up. Tsuge, who also dreams of making it big and has never won a writing award, understands Minato's feelings well. They both secretly do not want to give up. If Minato were truly ready to quit, he wouldn't wear out his shoes. Tsuge worries his advice might sound preachy and annoy Minato. Surprisingly, Minato finds it encouraging. He shyly suggests they could go to see cats next time, before quickly leaving. Meanwhile, shortly after Adachi responded to Kurosawa's confession, he received a call from Kurosawa as soon as he got home. Now, every call from Kurosawa makes Adachi blush. Kurosawa boldly asked him out for a weekend date, which Adachi agreed to. Excited, Kurosawa confirmed it wasn't a dream and vowed to make it a memorable date. On the day of the date, Adachi, too nervous, fell asleep late and overslept. He scrambled to find the right outfit, apologized to Kurosawa, who had just arrived. Meeting Kurosawa at the station felt awkward due to the pressure. However, Kurosawa found everything about Adachi adorable. Kurosawa, happy to be on the date, started humming a tune, which startled Adachi. He quickly stopped reading Kurosawa's mind. When Kurosawa heard Adachi struggled with choosing clothes, he offered to help pick out outfits. Adachi, knowing Kurosawa's good taste, thought he could find something nice. Imagining the fun of choosing clothes, Kurosawa was excited, but Adachi thought otherwise. Seeing Kurosawa's disappointed face, Adachi couldn't refuse, and allowed him to help choose a new, albeit expensive, outfit. Kurosawa planned to buy the outfit as a remembrance of their first date, which made Adachi tremble. He insisted on paying himself. At the moment of payment, he overheard the store manager's suggestive thought, "A man buying you clothes means he wants to take them off." Relieved, Adachi was glad he paid first. After visiting several attractions, Kurosawa mentioned he had booked a seaside restaurant for dinner. While walking, Kurosawa went to buy water, leaving Adachi waiting. Nearby, a girl remarked on Kurosawa's model-like appearance, considering approaching him. Some thought Adachi and Kurosawa were too close, but others disagreed, saying they were mismatched. When Kurosawa returned with drinks and tried to hold Adachi's hand, Adachi instinctively dodged. Feeling unsure about his spatial awareness, Kurosawa noticed and suggested they go for a walk before dinner. To Adachi's surprise, the walk led to a helicopter, leaving him stunned. Fearing heights, Adachi found the helicopter ride far from romantic. Shaking, he disembarked, and Kurosawa, considering his discomfort, canceled the restaurant plan and suggested Adachi rest. On the ride home, holding roses, Adachi felt sympathy for Kurosawa. Despite Adachi's lateness and reluctance to hold hands, Kurosawa was understanding and gentle, accommodating all changes. Reflecting on comments about their mismatch, Adachi heard Kurosawa's regrets about not noticing his discomfort and hoping Adachi didn't dislike him. Realizing Kurosawa was also nervous about the date, Adachi decided to express his feelings next time. The next day, a distressed Kurosawa feared losing Adachi due to the date's mishaps. Adachi, without mentioning any issues, took Kurosawa to buy a manga they both liked, and then to Adachi's favorite diner. On the way back, Adachi discussed the date, admitting he was preoccupied with others' opinions, but realized it wasn't important. What mattered was Kurosawa's effort to make him happy. Adachi concluded that if only he was happy and Kurosawa wasn't, it was pointless. What others thought didn't matter. A date should just be about both enjoying themselves. That's why an invitation was extended for this afternoon's shift. In Adachi's view, the only common interests between them are these two things. Instantly, Kurosawa felt healed. He then honestly admitted that there were many things he'd like to do with Adachi, but had only dared to imagine them before, fearing that speaking up might scare Adachi away. Adachi blushed and suggested taking things step by step, as sudden changes were hard for him to handle. Why be subtle? Is there anything I, as a VIP, can't hear? Adachi nearly fell, but Kurosawa quickly caught him. Remembering they hadn't successfully held hands during their date yesterday, Adachi mustered the courage to grab Kurosawa's hand, blushing and saying they would let go by the station. Kurosawa felt a surge of joy. His heart was so full that Adachi could barely make out the words, but he instinctively responded to Kurosawa's heartfelt confession. Adachi was startled by the intensity of Kurosawa's feelings, feeling as if he could read minds. If Kurosawa could really read minds, Adachi reflexively let go, his heart racing with nervousness and fear that Kurosawa might dislike him. Adachi pondered whether he should continue hiding his ability to read minds from Kurosawa. A month had passed since their date. Adachi was conflicted about whether to tell Kurosawa about his mind-reading ability, but they had been too busy recently to have a private conversation. Mainly, Adachi lacked the courage to confess, but felt it was inappropriate to keep hiding it. The company was recruiting testers for male fitness products and hadn't filled all spots yet. Knowing Kurosawa's birthday was in July from a touch, and that they were the same age this year, Yuta, who was in charge of recruitment, said they still needed more people and planned to have Adachi and Kurosawa bring some friends along. Adachi returned to his desk to think about what birthday gift to give, considering Kurosawa was quite particular. Using his mind-reading ability, he heard that Kurosawa had lost his earphones, so he decided to gift him a pair. Kurosawa noticed his action, and nearby, Fujisaki felt full. Elsewhere, Minato was dancing on stage. Tsuge was invited to watch the performance and brought a camera to take photos, but was mistaken for a voyeur. Minato spoke up for Tsuge, almost arguing with the manager who said that if Tsuge was really gathering material, he should dance himself. Hearing Minato's inner thoughts, Tsuge immediately took off his glasses and went on stage, but sprained his ankle within 5 seconds. Minato reflected that although Tsuge seemed stiff, he showed courage when it mattered. Tsuge was secretly pleased and showed Minato the photos he had taken. After Tsuge told him not to give up, Minato was deeply moved and stopped setting limits for himself, participating in a major company's audition and making it to the final round. Whether he could debut was another matter, but he wanted to share this news with Tsuge first. Moved, Tsuge watched as Minato suddenly took off his glasses, thinking to himself that Tsuge looked quite handsome without them. Hearing this, Tsuge slid to his knees, his phone falling out of his pocket. It displayed a message from Adachi asking him to find friends skilled in sports to test fitness equipment. On the day of the test, Adachi quietly gave Kurosawa a birthday gift while Yuta was away. Kurosawa was very happy to see the earphones. Adachi breathed a sigh of relief, thinking it best not to mention his mind-reading ability. The test then started, and most of the friends Kurosawa had invited were fitness enthusiasts, constantly talking about exercise. While Kurosawa was chatting with a friend, Tsuge and Minato arrived. It was the first time Adachi heard about Minato, a young friend of Tsuge who could even do splits on fitness equipment. Tsuge mentioned he wanted to meet with Adachi after being busy, as he had something to say. Adachi was shocked to feel Tsuge's abs when he touched them. Nearby, a jealous Kurosawa broke a piece of equipment. Just then, Minato left, and Kurosawa hurried over. Adachi introduced the two. Tsuge was curious about how Adachi was doing at the company, and Kurosawa immediately praised Adachi. Just then, Yuta came looking for them, so Adachi and Kurosawa left first. Tsuge knew Kurosawa must be the person who was inexplicably infatuated with Adachi, as mentioned before. Meanwhile, Yuta had organized everyone to scan a QR code and fill out a survey. He saw Minato, who needed the QR code. The two had been in the same dance club at university and started chatting. Adachi approached Tsuge, wondering if Tsuge knew he had such a friend. Tsuge was internally shocked, not knowing at all, and even revealed that he was a foolish man in love. Adachi was slow to realize, wondering how he connected with Tsuge's mind. It seemed there really was telepathy among magicians. Then Adachi confirmed with Tsuge, discovering he indeed had mind-reading abilities too. As they were talking, Tsuge also confessed his feelings for Minato. However, Kurosawa came around the corner just in time to hear Tsuge say he liked someone, and then Adachi screamed. Tsuge thought his voice was too loud and suggested they communicate mentally, so they talked in their minds for a while. Adachi said he was struggling with whether to tell Kurosawa about his mind-reading ability, but to Kurosawa it looked like Tsuge was confessing to Adachi, and then the two fell into a long silence. Afterward, Adachi showed a smile Kurosawa had never seen before, not knowing Adachi was just mentally encouraging Tsuge to pursue his feelings. They were about to leave the scene when Tsuge stepped out and turned back to find Adachi gone. At that moment, Minato approached, and Tsuge had no time to worry. Adachi was pulled into the next room by Kurosawa, who asked if Adachi liked Tsuge. Hearing Kurosawa's thoughts, Adachi felt somewhat helpless and explained that he and Tsuge were just friends, and Tsuge had been talking about liking another man. However, Adachi noticed Kurosawa seemed uneasy, so he decided to reveal the truth. He was afraid Kurosawa would reject being read, but he was willing to trust Kurosawa's feelings. So Adachi honestly admitted that he's actually a magician whose magic is quite cliché. He can read the thoughts of those he touches. At first, Kurosawa thought Adachi was joking and just didn't want to tell him the truth. Then, Adachi grabbed Kurosawa's hand and revealed he could hear Kurosawa's thoughts even before they started dating. He knew Kurosawa always complimented how cute he was and had even secretly bought pajamas that would fit him. At first, Adachi found it a bit absurd since Kurosawa was so good-looking yet had such odd thoughts. However, over time, he grew to like Kurosawa, despite fearing that his secret might upset him. When Kurosawa learned about Adachi's feelings during his first sleepover, he quickly accepted the reality after some initial embarrassment and was thrilled by Adachi's honesty. He seized the opportunity to get close and successfully kissed Adachi, exclaiming, "You too, give a warning before you kiss." Oh, my heart can't take this at my age. If Fujisaki knew, he'd faint right outside. Seeing that Kurosawa was getting addicted to kissing, Adachi felt he had to push him away because his heart couldn't take it anymore. Then the two left the storage room together. Kurosawa realized that the reason Adachi bought the headphones was because he had heard his inner thoughts. Feeling a bit guilty, Adachi admitted he lacked taste and didn't know what gift to give. However, Kurosawa told him he had many good qualities and would share them one by one with Adachi, and that he had received the best birthday gift ever, Adachi's first kiss. Adachi was overwhelmed by his charm. Meanwhile, Tsuge met with Minato and found out that although Minato knew Yuta, he seemed to be avoiding him. After interacting with Yuta, Tsuge understood the reason. Yuta had left the club under the pretext of job hunting, which might have caused Minato to feel distant. So, Tsuge quietly went to sort out some reports, encountering a supervisor who mentioned that the report format Yuta used was prepared by Adachi. Tsuge observed Adachi, who had returned with Kurosawa, and gave a meaningful smile. After completing the survey, Tsuge realized Minato hadn't taken any gifts, understanding through mind reading that Minato felt inadequate because Yuta had a proper job while he was still working part-time to support his dancing. Tsuge could relate, as he too had doubted the meaning of his work before his art became popular, and had envied Adachi for his stable job, avoiding him during that period. But Adachi never avoided him. Knowing there was a misunderstanding between them, although worried Yuta might be a rival in love, Tsuge didn't want to make Minato uncomfortable. He earnestly told Minato to cherish the friends made in college. Minato hesitated, but by then, Yuta had caught up with a gift, probably influenced by Tsuge's words. This time, Minato didn't avoid Yuta, and even invited him to dance occasionally. Tsuge was very pleased to see them reconcile. After they walked out, Tsuge didn't expect Minato to lean on his back to express gratitude, remarking on how tender and considerate he was, and a very reliable person. Tsuge was secretly pleased until Minato mentioned he reminded him of a father, which immediately deflated his smile. Couldn't he have just said he was like a big brother? Meanwhile, a supervisor handed over a system developed by Yuta to the manager, mentioning it was created by Adachi. The manager was impressed by Adachi's dedication since joining the company and his capabilities. Since he was single and another branch was opening, the manager considered transferring Adachi to be the manager there. At this time, Adachi and Kurosawa, the star-crossed lovers, were unaware of this development. Ever since finding out about Adachi's mind-reading ability, Kurosawa had been flirting with Adachi daily, using the skill even more adeptly than Adachi himself by speaking sweet nothings directly into his mind. When called into the office, Adachi feared he might have made a mistake or that his relationship with Kurosawa had been exposed. He was preparing to apologize, but instead, he was offered a position at the new branch. The sudden job transfer surprised him, but it was a promotion with better pay and housing allowance, which pleased him. However, the transfer meant separating from Kurosawa, and upon checking, Adachi found the commute would take 10 hours. He hadn't had the chance to discuss this with Kurosawa, planning to do so after their evening plans. But when Yuta came for data and found a mistake in Adachi's work, Adachi had to stay late to redo it, missing their scheduled concert. Adachi felt guilty and worried since he couldn't see Kurosawa's reaction, and knew Kurosawa was good at hiding his feelings. While working overtime, He met the supervisor who recommended him for the position and decided to discuss it. The next day, Kurosawa found out from the supervisor that Adachi had declined the transfer. The supervisor urged him not to miss such a good opportunity. Kurosawa was shocked that Adachi hadn't discussed such a significant matter with him. Adachi received a message from Kurosawa wanting to talk after work. They met up and agreed to go to a concert together next time. Kurosawa then asked if Adachi had declined the job transfer, because he had overheard the supervisor. He questioned why Adachi hadn't consulted him on such an important issue, especially since they were dating. Kurosawa, although reluctant to be apart from Adachi, believed it was a great opportunity for him and wished Adachi had discussed it with him, questioning if Adachi didn't trust him enough. Adachi shook his head, wanting to argue, but quickly realized he lacked confidence. He was worried that without touching Kurosawa, he wouldn't hear his thoughts. Kurosawa expressed what Adachi feared, a long-distance relationship leading to a breakup. He also mentioned he didn't have mind-reading abilities and wouldn't understand Adachi's thoughts if Adachi kept silent. Switching to the subplot, Minato accidentally discovered a romance novel written by Tsuge at a bookstore. It was Tsuge's latest release, and the protagonist was based on Minato. However, Minato hadn't noticed this yet, and the semi-finals of a dance competition were approaching, with Minato's idol as the judge. Tsuge promised to support Minato. Meanwhile, after separating from Kurosawa, Adachi spent a sleepless night overthinking. Luckily, it was his day off the next day. Looking at the romance novel beside him, he decided to seek Tsuge's advice. Tsuge confirmed that Adachi was wrong to ignore his boyfriend and talk to someone else. He mentioned that Adachi's lack of self-esteem and reliance on mind-reading might make him act based on others' thoughts. Tsuge advised that since they were serious about their relationship, they should communicate openly and suggested a method for doing so. On the other side, Minato aimed to impress his idol during the semi-finals. While other judges praised him, his idol found no one qualified, though he specifically mentioned Minato's technical skills in dancing. The semi-final eliminated 18 contestants, who would compete in a revival round decided by audience votes for a chance to enter the finals. Tsuge messaged Minato to assure his support during the voting. After the competition, Minato, feeling outclassed by younger participants, considered giving up. Yuta and friends came to cheer and promised to help campaign for him. That evening, after work, Minato received a call from his boss about a full-time position offer at the company, acknowledging his diligence and considering his dream, but suggesting a meeting with the president. The next day, Minato met with the president, finding the company appealing. The revival round was scheduled for that evening. Tsuge was packing to head to the venue early when he unexpectedly received a call from Minato. Minato's motorcycle had broken down halfway there, and it was still some distance to the station. He felt it was fate. Adding to his doubts, his idol had commented that he only had technique, and he was surrounded by younger, talented individuals. Maybe he really wasn't cut out for this field. Tsuge wouldn't hear of it. Without a second word, he asked for the address and immediately left to pick up Minato. Minato was surprised to find out Tsuge had a driver's license. Tsuge arrived on a motorcycle and encouraged Minato all the way, knowing how hard he had worked for this competition. As long as Minato didn't lose heart, Tsuge believed his dreams could be realized. Minato moved, hugged Tsuge's waist. With Tsuge's help, Minato arrived at the competition venue and quickly went backstage. Tsuge sighed in relief. It had been a long time since he last drove, and his legs were a bit shaky. Remembering Tsuge's encouragement, Minato tightened his shoelaces. He had thought Tsuge was a strange person, but he had been continuously supportive of his dreams. His other friends were also at the venue. Minato took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, ultimately winning the revival round and advancing to the finals, even earning praise from his idol. Seeing Minato advance, Tsuge was deeply moved. Curious, Minato asked why he was so good to him. Tsuge paused, admitting he had ulterior motives, but was interrupted before he could explain further, as a staff member needed Minato backstage. They parted, and Tsuge later learned online that Minato had lost in the finals. Meanwhile, Adachi was contemplating how to communicate with Kurosawa, but Kurosawa returned from his trip early, causing them to miss their chance to meet. Kurosawa worried that Adachi might be afraid of him, and thought keeping busy might help him forget his concerns. Tsuge couldn't contact Minato and was very worried about him. The delivery person had changed, and Tsuge felt like an old man unworthy of the youthful and vibrant Minato. Remembering his earlier confession of ulterior motives, Tsuge worried he might be seen as a creep. If that was the case, he couldn't pester Minato. Both couples were going through a rough patch. Tsuge left his house distracted, pausing to look at shoes and then learning about a new dance group debuting, with Minato as one of the members. Tsuge felt a sense of loss. They were never meant to be in the same world. Minato deserved a bigger stage. At the same time, Kurosawa discovered that Adachi was going on a business trip tomorrow for 10 days. Both couples were experiencing a low point. Kurosawa regretted what he had said to Adachi the other day. His thoughts were chaotic, and he believed he had frightened Adachi. He thought that even in a relationship, he had no right to interfere with Adachi's decisions. Kurosawa wanted to apologize but couldn't find the words. Work kept him busy, and they couldn't meet. During his gloomy days, a letter from Adachi broke his chain of thoughts. In the letter, Adachi expressed his struggle with communication and his over-reliance on mind reading, worrying about feeling uneasy without hearing Kurosawa's voice. However, he confessed his fondness for Kurosawa and hoped to talk more upon his return. Kurosawa was relieved. The idea to write a letter came from Tsuge, who suggested that if Adachi struggled with verbal communication, writing would be more formal and meaningful, like a love letter. Following instructions, Adachi arrived at a local store and quickly settled into his new job. Kurosawa was right. Adachi was smart but lacked self-confidence, often attributing his abilities to Kurosawa's influence. Meanwhile, Tsuge resumed writing but found it impossible to capture Minato in words. Minato had his debut performance, which was very lively, but he received a gift forwarded by his manager. Others thought it was from a fan, but after seeing the dance shoes, Minato quickly asked about the giver's appearance. Hearing the description of a tall, skinny man with glasses, he rushed out without a word. Tsuge, who was leaving in sorrow, received a call from Minato, who asked him to wait. Minato soon arrived and explained that after the finals, his idol had offered him a chance to join a new dance group. It was a sudden and secretive project, which is why he hadn't contacted Tsuge. Tsuge breathed a sigh of relief and congratulated him on achieving his dream. Minato hesitated, then confessed he had been pondering Tsuge's words about having ulterior motives, unable to decide if they were good or bad, thus delaying contact. Tsuge knew as an adult he could evade the topic and pretend to be good, but he couldn't lie to someone he liked. He admitted that his initial contact with Minato was because of his attraction and hoped that Minato would reciprocate. He also confessed that the dancer in his novel was inspired by Minato, but he wouldn't do it again. Previously, he thought his unrequited love wouldn't succeed, so he wrote it into a story, deciding the ending himself. However, after meeting Minato, he realized that no fictional ending could compare to the real Minato, and confessed his true feelings. Tsuge then said that since it was a pivotal time in Minato's career, he would no longer disturb him. To his surprise, Minato earnestly asked him why he was giving up so early, and told him not to end the story prematurely. Minato admitted that initially he found Tsuge odd, but it was Tsuge who supported him from behind, encouraging him all the way. Minato revealed that he performed in the semi-finals specifically for Tsuge. Embarrassed, Minato expressed that if Tsuge left now, it would be difficult for him. Confused, Tsuge listened as an exasperated Minato asked how he could claim to be a romance novelist and not see the obvious. Overwhelmed by the surprise, Tsuge nearly stumbled but joyfully hugged Minato. Thus the couple resolved their issues. Turning our attention to Adachi, he was reflecting on how wonderful and perfect Kurosawa was on his way home from work, when he was caught in a heavy rain. As he approached the hotel, he saw Kurosawa soaked by the rain. Adachi quickly pulled him into the hotel to dry his hair. Kurosamura apologized, saying he had to see Adachi after reading his letter because he wanted to hear Adachi's thoughts in person. He wished he had the ability to read minds so he could understand Adachi better. Blushing, Adachi gathered the courage to share his feelings. He first talked about his initial impression of Kurosawa as a perfect person, but after gaining the ability to read minds, he saw that Kurosawa, though perfect-looking, also had a jealous side. This imperfection made Kurosawa even more endearing to Adachi. Surprised, Kurosawa grabbed Adachi's hand, eager to hear more praises. He even wanted to record Adachi's words on his phone. Feeling Kurosawa's joy, Adachi didn't know how to reciprocate his feelings, so he simply kissed him. Kurosawa responded by wrapping his arms around Adachi's waist, and the two became lost in their embrace, oblivious to the world around them. The next day, Adachi woke up feeling very shy about the events of the previous night when he was overwhelmed by Kurosawa's thoughts. He wished he could hide somewhere because of his embarrassment. When Kurosawa woke up, he affectionately came up to Adachi like a puppy. To Adachi's surprise, he realized he could no longer hear Kurosawa's thoughts. It seemed losing his virginity also meant losing that special ability. Kurosawa quickly made coffee for Adachi and confessed that although mind reading is powerful, he was happy that Adachi still accepted and liked him, despite knowing all his dark thoughts. Kurosawa sincerely told Adachi that his initial feelings weren't due to the mind reading, but because of the care Adachi showed without realizing it. When Kurosawa asked if Adachi regretted their intimacy, Adachi immediately denied any regrets, explaining he truly fell for Kurosawa, which is why he panicked when he couldn't read his mind anymore. He promised to express his feelings more openly from now on, which might be why the magic disappeared. Kurosawa was moved to tears by Adachi's words. He said Adachi always says such cool things. Kurosawa admitted that he used to seek perfection, but since falling for Adachi, small things would move him. Adachi had seen his flaws and bad thoughts, and in front of Adachi, he couldn't maintain his perfection. Yet, he wasn't anxious about it. He worried about going crazy if Adachi stopped liking him, but Adachi assured him that wouldn't happen. They wanted to spend more time together, but Kurosawa had to catch an early flight. Before leaving, he kissed Adachi, and they agreed to discuss a job transfer upon his return. After Kurosawa left, Adachi returned to work. His business trip ended quickly, and upon returning to Kurosawa's home, he was warmly received. After a meal, Adachi announced he accepted the job transfer. Initially, he was only interested in the good pay, not the job itself. However, seeing the empty space made him excited about starting from scratch to create his ideal shop. He hoped to return within a year. Kurosawa supported all of Adachi's ideas, prompting Adachi to inform his boss of his decision. Once his goals were set, Adachi began moving. Tsuge came to help pack, and although Kurosawa wanted to help, he couldn't because of work. During the move, Tsuge, using his ability to read minds, realized Adachi had shed his magician's identity and congratulated him. Tsuge then felt shy, wondering if he too might one day lose his magician status. 1 month after arriving at the branch, Adachi found that work was not as simple as he thought. Trouble followed one after another, and he relied heavily on a senior colleague for help. When the headquarters heard that Adachi was struggling, they were concerned. Upon hearing the news, Kurosawa was very worried, continuing to work despite being sick. Yuta urged him to rest properly, while Fujisaki fainted nearby. Exhausted, Adachi still had to prepare documents when he returned home. Being from the headquarters, everyone saw him as a reassurance pill and came to him with their issues, yet he couldn't accomplish much and often had to ask his senior colleague for help. As it started to rain heavily outside, Adachi thought back to when Kurosawa visited him a month ago and missed him dearly. Meanwhile, Kurosawa was also thinking about Adachi, only learning of his troubles through others, which was not apparent in their usual conversations. Adachi was also worried about Kurosawa's cold since their relationship was not known to others, adding to their panic. Both felt something had to be done for each other. Adachi identified some issues at work, corrected a mistake before printing, quickly finished his tasks, and successfully took leave. Feeling he couldn't just sit back, he was eager to see Kurosawa. It felt like they might miss each other by both wanting to meet. However, Kurosawa could only leave after work. They met outside the company, and Kurosawa, who was headed to the airport, was surprised to see Adachi. He quickly canceled his ticket and had a heart-to-heart talk with Adachi. Adachi expressed his anxiety due to the long separation, pondered a lot about how to alleviate this feeling, and concluded he would move in with Kurosawa in Tokyo after his business trip, so they could always be together. Kurosawa, barely able to stand from excitement, had thought even further ahead, preparing to propose with rings in hand. As love and careers got on track, Minato and Tsuge's relationship also warmed up. After completing his work, Adachi returned to the headquarters. Fujisaki, keenly observant, noticed their rings and was overly excited. Soon after moving in together, they publicly announced their relationship and got married. What a perfect service for shipping couples.